Mother's Day morning started like a dream. Soft light coming through the curtains, the smell of cinnamon toast floating in, and then the sound of little feet racing down the hallway. Sophie burst in, all sunshine and messy curls, carrying a tray with breakfast wobbling in her tiny hands, scrambled eggs, orange juice, and a daisy in a juice glass. Right next to it, her handmade card. Thomas was behind her, watching quietly, and I thought for a second that life was exactly where it should be. Sophie climbed into bed and threw her arms around me. "Happy Mother's Day, Mommy," she sang, eyes wide with excitement. I kissed the top of her head, laughing, and picked up the card. I expected hearts and flowers and a crooked drawing of the three of us. But what I saw pulled the breath right from my lungs. Written in bright purple crayon, "Happy Mother's Day, Maria. You are the best." Signed, proudly, in Sophie's handwriting. I didn't move. I couldn't. I kept my voice gentle. "Sweetheart, who's Maria?" Sophie looked up at me with all the innocence in the world. "That's who Daddy told me to write it for first," she said. But then he said never mind. My chest went tight. My hands went cold. I smiled and nodded like everything was fine. But inside, something cracked. Quietly, precisely. And just like that, Mother's Day became a puzzle. And I already had the first piece. I went through the motions. Smiled at Sophie, thanked Thomas, even managed to take a bite of those 2 salty eggs. But inside, everything had shifted, like the floor beneath me wasn't quite solid anymore. I watched him from across the tray, how he avoided my eyes, how his smile didn't quite reach. He kissed my cheek, said he needed to check an email before brunch, and left the room. I just sat there, holding the card like it was made of glass and betrayal all at once. Maria. The name pulsed in my mind like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing. It wasn't just a mistake. Kids don't make up names. They repeat what they're told. And I knew my daughter's handwriting. Knew that Thomas had helped her spell it. It wasn't just a slip. It was a signal. And now that I'd seen it, I couldn't unsee it. Something had happened. And he didn't think I'd ever know. But I did. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even shake. Instead, my mind snapped awake like a door creaking open in a quiet house. I started remembering things, phrases, absences, a cologne I didn't buy. This wasn't the first clue, just the first I couldn't ignore. And if that card had slipped through, what else had? Later that morning, while Sophie played in the living room and Thomas took a suspiciously long shower, I sat at the kitchen table with that card in front of me. I ran my fingers over the crayon letters. Thick, innocent, damning. My coffee went cold while I thought. Not just about Maria, but about how calm I felt. Not numb. Clear. Like something inside me had stopped begging for honesty and started calculating instead. I thought about all the quiet sacrifices I'd made. Nights I stayed up with Sophie while he worked late. Birthdays I planned alone. The times I brushed off gut feelings as paranoia. I thought about the woman he was with. Did she know about me? About our daughter? Had she ever sat in this kitchen, smiled in my direction, worn her hair neat to impress my husband? The thought should have made me fall apart. But I didn't. Because I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If he could hand me a lie wrapped in a holiday, I could hand him the truth, tied in a bow. Not today, not yet. But when the time was right, he would wish that card had never left our daughter's hand. I didn't confront him. Not that day. Not the next. I smiled when he made coffee, laughed when he retold a story I'd heard 100 times, and let him kiss my forehead like nothing had changed. But everything had. I became someone else. Quieter. More careful. I watched him, noted his habits, the way he guarded his phone like it held state secrets. I let him believe I was still asleep, still soft. But I wasn't. One afternoon, while he ran out to get groceries, I went looking. It wasn't dramatic, just methodical. I started with his email on the shared laptop, notifications he thought he deleted, flights he never told me about, an Uber to a hotel on a Wednesday night when he'd said he had a team dinner. The pieces weren't scattered. They were just tucked away, waiting for someone to stop pretending they didn't see them. I saw them now. And the worst part? It wasn't even hard. I opened the center console in his car, and there it was. A second phone, cheap and dirty looking, like the kind used for drug deals or dirty secrets. Locked, of course. But I didn't need the messages. Just the existence of that phone was enough. Enough to confirm what I'd started to suspect. Enough to prove Maria wasn't just a name in a card. Her name came up in his inbox, buried in a forwarded meeting invite. Maria L. No last name spelled out, just the initial, like she was trying not to leave footprints. But I knew. She worked with him. I remembered her vaguely from a Christmas party 2 years back. Tall, polished, too eager to laugh at his jokes. At the time, I brushed it off. Now? Now I saw it differently. Her hand had been reaching into my life for longer than I realized. I started piecing it together like a mosaic built from betrayal. There were receipts, wine bars we'd never visited together, gifts I never received. I found a photo of our backyard from a strange angle, sent from her email to his. That was the one that made my stomach twist. She had been in my home, while Sophie napped in the next room, while I was out picking up groceries, folding laundry, trusting. The audacity didn't just sting, it scorched. But I didn't scream. I didn't call her. I didn't cry to my mother. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat down at the kitchen counter, and started a new note in my phone. Operation Mother's Day. Because if he was bold enough to plant her in my life, I'd be bold enough to show them both just how deep roots can burn. I watched them differently after that. Thomas, with his carefully measured lies, and Sophie, with her honest little heart caught in the middle. That's what hurt the most. Not just that he cheated, but that he used our daughter to deliver his mess. That card wasn't just a slip. It was a wound with glitter glued around the edges. But instead of bleeding, I studied. Every late text, every rushed shower, every work meeting that didn't quite add up, I logged it all. At night, I lay next to him, my body still, my mind racing. The irony wasn't lost on me, how I'd once memorized his laugh, his scent, his warmth. And now I was memorizing his inconsistencies, his tells, the signs of someone playing house while building another life just beyond the walls of mine. And yet, I never let it show. Not once. Because what I was planning needed patience, timing, precision. He gave me deception dressed as devotion. I'd give him clarity he'd never forget. And as for Maria, she walked into my home thinking she was unseen. But I saw her now. And soon, everyone else would too. I started planning the dinner the very next morning. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a shouting match. No, I wanted elegance. I wanted memory. Something that would echo. I told Thomas I wanted to host a Mother's Day dinner. Just something small. Family, a few close friends, maybe even some of his coworkers. He smiled like it was sweet. Said, "You deserve it, babe." I smiled back, thinking, you have no idea what I deserve. I made lists, menus, decorations, seating arrangements. But behind each checklist was something sharper. I created a fake email, sent a formal invitation to Maria, posed as the office assistant, said it was a surprise celebration in my honor, and that attendance would reflect well on her team spirit. I knew she'd come. Women like her never turn down a chance to be admired, or to feel like they've won. And that made me certain she wouldn't see this coming. Meanwhile, I met with a lawyer. Nothing loud, just a lunch downtown. I smiled as I handed over every document he needed. Bank statements, mortgage details, even a timeline of behavior. He said, "You've done your homework." I said, "I'm a mother. We don't sleep, we prepare." And prepare I did. While Thomas scrolled through his phone and pretended to be busy, I was quietly building a stage. I arranged for a slideshow, told everyone it would be a sweet little montage of motherhood through the years. "You'll love it," I told him one night while he chewed dinner and barely looked up. "It'll remind us how far we've come." He nodded, clueless. Every lie he'd told me had softened my voice into velvet. Every secret gave me more reason to smile. I carefully curated the images. The first few were genuine. Sophie's first bath, her first steps, me and her baking cookies in matching aprons. The kind of stuff that made people tear up and say, "Aw." But woven in, like a thread meant to unravel everything, were the truth bombs. The card, the text screenshots, the photo of him and Maria outside that hotel, arms around each other like a couple in a Hallmark movie. It was all there, already. And I still kissed him goodnight, still folded his shirts, still asked about his day. He thought I was healing, maybe even blooming. And in a way, I was. But not for him, not for us, for the version of me that refused to be fooled again. I didn't hate him, not in the way people expect. What I felt was colder than that, cleaner, like I'd finally rinsed the fog from the mirror and could see the truth. About him, about us, about how easy it was to fall asleep in a life that wasn't real. He thought I was just a wife, just a mother. But he forgot one thing. I was also watching. And I knew how to turn a wound into a weapon without ever raising my voice. Behind every detail of the dinner, I hid intention. The seating chart placed Maria 2 chairs down from me, just far enough to feel safe, just close enough to feel the blast. I even picked her wine, Sauvignon Blanc, the same bottle she and Thomas had ordered at that hotel, according to the receipt I'd found. I wondered if she'd taste the irony. I hoped she would. I hoped she'd savor it just long enough to realize what was coming. The night was set, the guests confirmed. The slideshow was saved under a name only I recognized, for the woman who forgot I exist. He walked around the house that week like everything was fine, and I let him, because the show was about to begin. The house looked beautiful that evening, candles flickering, soft jazz playing, wine glasses lined up like soldiers. I wore a soft pink dress, the one he always said made me look effortlessly elegant. Sophie was with my sister for the night. I didn't want her anywhere near what was about to unfold. Guests trickled in, laughing, hugging, handing me flowers. Thomas moved around the room like a proud husband. And then she walked in. Maria. She wore a navy sheath dress, heels too high for the tile, and a smile so cautious it was almost guilty. I greeted her like she was just another colleague. Her eyes flicked nervously around the room, probably searching for clues, but I offered none. Only warmth, only grace. She had no idea she'd been seated at the table I set for truth. No idea her undoing would arrive between salad and dessert. She clinked glasses with Thomas. I watched. And I waited. Dinner was loud and lovely, on the surface. But every compliment felt like static in my ears. I watched him laugh too loud, touch her wrist too long. I watched her steal glances, adjusting her napkin like it might hide her shame. And just as the plates were cleared, I stood up, smiling. I tapped my glass gently. The room quieted like someone had pressed pause. "Before dessert," I began, "I just wanted to say a few words." I felt the weight of every eye, some glazed with wine, some already misting with emotion. "Being a mother has been the greatest gift of my life," I said, steady and warm. "Not just for the joy, it's also taught me things I never expected to learn." Thomas smiled, unaware. Maria tilted her head, sensing something shift. I reached for the remote I had placed beside the floral centerpiece. "So tonight," I continued, "I put together a little slideshow. a tribute to the beauty of motherhood, to truth, and to the moments that make us who we are. A few guests sighed, already charmed. I clicked the remote. The projector blinked to life. The first photo appeared, me cradling Sophie as a newborn, exhausted and glowing. Soft music played. There were murmurs of awe around the table. Thomas leaned back, relaxed. Slide 2. Sophie's first steps in our old living room. Slide 3. Her in a Halloween costume, grinning wide. And then, slide 4. A scan of the card. Happy Mother's Day, Maria. Silence. A sharp inhale from someone near the back. Thomas shifted in his chair. Slide 5 hit harder. A screen capture of a message thread. His name, her name. Their words. Intimate. Shameless. Familiar. Slide 6 was a hotel receipt. Dated. Time-stamped. Room number highlighted. Slide 7? A photo of them. Arm in arm. Unaware of the camera. Too wrapped up in each other to notice the world around them. The room didn't breathe. A fork dropped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Maria's face went paper white. Thomas looked like he'd been slapped without warning. I turned toward them slowly. He stared at the screen like it might rearrange itself. Maria didn't dare look at me, her wine glass frozen in her grip. "Thank you all for coming," I said, calm as ever. "It's meant so much to share this journey of motherhood with people I love." I paused, then looked directly at Thomas. "And as for you, happy Father's Day in advance. You'll be celebrating it from a distance." That's when I finally sat down. No one moved. Someone cleared their throat. A chair scraped against tile. Maria stood up too fast and almost tripped on her heel. Thomas opened his mouth, but no words came. I picked up my wine glass, took a small sip, and smiled. Because everything I needed to say had already been said. He left that night with nothing but his keys and a stunned expression. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I simply handed him the envelope from my lawyer and told him, "The rest will come through official channels." He didn't fight. He didn't even speak. Just stood in the doorway for a moment like he was waiting for a different version of me to show up. But she was gone. The woman who forgave everything, who doubted herself, who accepted crumbs. That woman no longer lived here. The divorce moved quickly. When you plan in silence, you move in strength. Maria didn't last long at the company. Word got around. Not because I told anyone. I didn't have to. The story told itself. People noticed the details. How she never met my eyes. How Thomas avoided questions. How I smiled without bitterness. I wasn't a victim. I was the woman who saw through it and responded with grace sharp enough to cut through bone. Friends called me brave. Family called me brilliant. But what mattered most was how Sophie looked at me. With trust. With warmth. As if, even though something had shifted, she knew I had never left her side. I took time to rebuild. Not just our home, but myself. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about returning to the woman I used to be before I lowered my standards in the name of love. I painted Sophie's room the soft lavender she'd been asking for. I took her to the park on weekdays, just because. We danced in the kitchen to silly music. We lit candles at dinner even when it was just the two of us. There was peace again. Real, earned peace. One night, weeks later, she asked me, "Mommy, is Daddy coming back?" I didn't lie. I didn't twist it into a fairy tale. I took a deep breath and said, "No, sweetheart. He made choices that weren't kind to us. And sometimes when people choose the wrong things, they lose the right to stay." Her eyes searched mine, not afraid, just curious. Then she nodded, snuggled close, and whispered, "I'm glad I wrote you the card." I almost cried, but I held her instead, tight, steady, strong. Because that tiny, accidental mistake, that one wrong name scrawled in crayon, It led us here. To truth. To quiet. To a better version of forever. That night, after Sophie drifted off to sleep, I stood by her door a little longer than usual. The hallway was quiet. Our home was quiet. But it was the kind of silence that heals, not the kind that hides secrets. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water and looked around. Same house, same furniture. But everything felt different. Not because he was gone, because I was finally back, present, whole, undistracted. I've told this story to a few women, quietly, over coffee, or whispered between soft laughs and shared understanding. They always lean in a little closer when I get to the part about the card. A child's handwriting? They say. That's how you found out? I nod, because sometimes the truth doesn't arrive in a dramatic scene. Sometimes it shows up in purple crayon, carried by the hand of someone who loves you the most. One wrong name. That's all it took. One name meant for another, gave me every answer I needed. And now, when I hear Sophie call me Mommy, I know she's saying it to the right woman.
Here before someone sees. That's what my mother said about my children, her grandchildren, and she didn't whisper it. She said it in her garden in broad daylight, one hand on her pearls, the other holding a wine glass. My son was 10, my daughter was 7, and they were sitting on the porch steps, drawing quietly on napkins because we forgot to pack coloring books. My father didn't say anything, just nodded once and looked away, like maybe if he didn't make eye contact, the shame wouldn't belong to him. I stood still, like my body forgot what to do. The next morning, I was handed an ultimatum over breakfast. My mother folded her cloth, napkin, perfectly in half before speaking. Lena, I love your kids, but not everyone needs to see them. We'll pay for boarding school. Something discreet. You can stay here, be part of the foundation again, but you need to do what's best. Best? They meant quiet. They meant invisible. They meant, your kids don't fit the image we built. Because my son had ADHD. Because my daughter had meltdowns sometimes. Because they weren't dressed in matching sweaters and didn't sit with their hands folded at the dinner table. They wanted the illusion, not the reality. And I had a choice. I could have argued, could have cried, could have tried to educate them again like I had so many times before. But instead I said, okay. I didn't explain what that meant. I simply tucked my children into bed that night, kissed their foreheads and whispered, "You're perfect." And then I got to work, because they thought I would leave quietly. They had no idea I would take everything with me. They didn't know I handled their digital accounts. Didn't know I had power of attorney for my father's media holdings. Didn't know the foundation's largest donor had quietly switched her legal address to my apartment last year for tax reasons. They didn't know because they never asked. They assumed I was just the daughter who made things look nice. But the truth? I was the spine of their empire. And when I pulled back, everything would start to fold. I wasn't raised by bad people. I was raised by perfect people. The kind who hosted charity auctions, but only posed for photos with certain guests. The kind who donated to causes as long as there was press coverage and a plaque. We didn't say things like therapy. We didn't mention disability. We didn't make people uncomfortable. We smiled. We were graceful. We were curated. Growing up, I learned how to be good at things that looked good. I danced. I smiled on cue. I ironed my pleated skirts. I studied what they told me to study. And when I married someone they approved of, they congratulated themselves like they'd closed another business deal. But when I divorced him 5 years later, after he left me with 2 kids and a mountain of unpaid bills, the congratulations turned to silence. I became a complication. And worse, my children didn't blend. My son Noah is brilliant, kinetic, emotional, loud in the best ways. He can tell you the life cycle of a frog and the entire periodic table, but he forgets to tie his shoes. He talks fast when he's excited, gets distracted by textures, taps his pencil in rhythms that mean something only to him. To me, he's a wonder. To them, he's a problem. My daughter, June, is tender, the kind of child who feels things to the bone. She cries when she sees animals in cages, gets overwhelmed by loud music, needs more time to warm up. She draws entire stories in silence, then hands me pages with characters that have my eyes. To me, she's magic. To them, she's fragile. I try to shield them. When we visited, I packed quiet toys, coached them on manners, watched them like a hawk, ready to intercept judgment before it landed. But it always did. My mother once looked at Noah during dinner and said, "Maybe he's just undisciplined." And when June cried after getting overwhelmed by a room full of people, my father shook his head and muttered, "Overly sensitive, just like her mother." They never said it directly, but I heard it in every pause. "You're not raising them right. They're not like us. Maybe they don't belong here." So when they gave me that final ultimatum, boarding school or get out, I didn't scream. I finally heard them for what they really were. And in that moment, I made a decision. If I had to choose between protecting my children's joy or protecting my family's image, there was no choice. They would never make my children feel small again. And they were about to learn what happens when the invisible daughter finally shows up. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't make a scene. Didn't post a message. Didn't tell a single soul outside my closest friend. I just packed my children's things while they were still sleeping, left a folded note on the marble counter, and drove away before sunrise. The note said, "Thank you for your offer. We decline." By noon that day, I'd already frozen 2 internal family accounts, ones that I managed quietly for years, under their names, but through my access. Not stolen, not hidden, just paused, because the foundation we ran had 3 co-signers, my father, my mother, and me. And the second I felt my children were no longer safe under their roof, I initiated my legal right to temporarily freeze transactions pending independent audit. It was something I'd written into the charter myself years ago after noticing some creative bookkeeping. They forgot, because they forgot what I was actually worth. The calls started that evening. My father first. Controlled, measured. "Lena, we need to talk. Some of the vendors are saying they haven't received final payment. We're not sure what's going on, but I assume it's a technical error." No mention of the note. No mention of my children. Just the money. I didn't answer. Then the board members started calling. 2 of them emailed, asking if I had insight into the situation. One of them even said, "We were under the impression you were still overseeing donor relations. Without you, some things have stalled." Exactly, because while they posed for interviews, while they handed out scholarships with cameras rolling, while they accepted praise from donors who never met the recipients, I was the one writing the letters. I was the one keeping the books. I was the one who answered midnight emails from people in crisis. They built the brand. I did the work. And now, the work had left the building. Within 48 hours, 3 payments bounced. A scholarship student called crying because her rent wasn't paid on time, and she hadn't heard back from the office. My mother had forwarded the email to her assistant with one line, "Can we delay this until next quarter?" Her tone felt entitled. I saw the message, because the assistant, she was the first person to quietly reach out and say, "What's going on? It feels like everything's cracking." It was, but not because I broke anything. I just stopped holding up. They still hadn't apologized. They didn't ask where I was. Didn't ask if my kids were okay. Didn't ask if I was hurt by what they said. They only wanted things to go back to the way they were. But the thing about silence, once you let it speak for you, it says everything. My parents always thought I was obedient. Not because I was weak, but because I never pushed back in public. They confused silence with submission. But while they were performing for donors and newspapers, I was studying contracts, learning systems, building relationships with the people who actually made things move. And now, I was about to remove myself from every single thing I once held together. The first step was legal. I met with my lawyer, Miriam, a quiet woman with a sharper mind than most politicians. We reviewed the foundation structure, the trust accounts, the multi-family investment fund I helped organize 5 years ago. She raised an eyebrow. "You understand you're not just a participant here," she said. "You have authority. Real authority." "I know," I said. I just never used it. Well, you're about to. We filed formal notices to all foundation partners and sponsors. I was stepping down from all roles immediately. I was releasing my co-signing rights, and I was requesting a third-party audit of all donor-related financial activity in the last 2 fiscal years. Not because I was accusing anyone, but because I no longer trusted anything with their names on it. Then came the public step. I didn't write an expose. I didn't go to the press. I did something far simpler and far more devastating. I issued a single, calm, professional statement on LinkedIn. It read, "After 12 years of working behind the scenes at the foundation name, I've chosen to step away. I'm proud of the community we've supported. I look forward to building something more transparent, inclusive, and human." That was it. No mud, no names, no drama, but it spread like fire, because anyone who had worked with us knew what that statement really meant. My inbox flooded. Former interns, donors, volunteers. One message stood out. "You were the only reason I stayed as long as I did. I always wondered how you smiled through it all." I didn't answer, because I didn't need to explain myself anymore. My parents didn't call, but their silence turned frantic behind the scenes. I heard through a vendor that my mother had tried to reassign me publicly, claimed I was taking a leave to focus on family. I responded with one sentence, forwarded through legal. "Please cease misrepresentation of my employment status. I am no longer affiliated with your organization." It wasn't a threat. It was a wall. And this time, they couldn't climb it. They thought I was bluffing, even after the legal notices, even after the LinkedIn post, even after I removed myself from every signature and every login. They still assumed I'd come back, that I'd cool down, that once I felt better, I'd return to my place behind the curtain. But I wasn't angry. I was done. The cracks became headlines. First, a delay in scholarship disbursements. Then, a public correction issued by one of the foundation's largest sponsors, distancing themselves from the board. I didn't say a word, but others did. Donors noticed that the voice behind the emails was gone. Volunteers noticed that no one responded to urgent requests. Former partners began pulling out quietly, saying, "Let us know when Lena returns." Except I wouldn't. And for the first time, my parents realized something they had never admitted out loud. I wasn't just part of the system. I was the system. My mother tried to recover the image. She released a statement about realigning the foundation's future with modern values, which was just her way of saying, "Please don't ask us what happened." My father, predictably, stayed quiet. That was always his role, the steady man in the background. But without me, the background started falling apart. Internal audits began. 2 former employees filed complaints about hostile work culture. A podcast that once praised their philanthropy now aired an episode called "When Good Optics Hide Rotten Roots." And still I said nothing, because revenge wasn't my goal. I didn't need to destroy them. I just needed to stop protecting them. And without my silence, without my labor, without my name floating quietly behind their polished press releases, their story unraveled all by itself. Then came the final move. The house. They thought I'd forgotten. Years ago, they transferred part ownership of one of their vacation homes into a family trust, meant for future grandchildren retreats. Something poetic and performative. But I was listed as co-owner. And now, I no longer needed it. So I sold my share to a nonprofit that runs inclusive retreats for families with neurodivergent children. My lawyer handled it all. When the paperwork went through, the new co-owner informed my mother the annual founders-only gathering could no longer be held on the property without a usage agreement. She was livid. She called me, first time in months. Voicemail, of course. "You're out of control, Lena. This isn't about the kids. This is about punishing us." I played it twice, then deleted it, because it wasn't punishment. It was permission, the kind I'd waited too long to give myself. They used to say I was sensitive, too emotional, too reactive, but all I did was remove myself. And when I left, so did everything they built on top of me. Collapse doesn't look the way people expect. It's not dramatic. It's not instant. It's slow, embarrassing, revealing. And it always starts quietly. The foundation's website began glitching. Their assistant, the one who used to forward all difficult questions to me, quit with no notice. The summer fundraiser they'd been planning got pulled when their biggest corporate sponsor backed out, citing internal alignment concerns. Rumors started circulating. Not from me, not from any public source, but from the people who'd worked with us for years, who now whispered the truth over wine and gallery openings. Wasn't Lena the one actually running things? Why did she leave? You know, she was never even in the family portraits. I wasn't in those photos. Not once. Even during galas I coordinated, fundraisers I built, award dinners I scripted, they always kept me out of frame. I wasn't stylish enough. Not photogenic. Too plain. My mother once cropped me out of a photo and posted the rest with the caption, "Grateful for everyone who makes this mission possible." Now, they couldn't hide behind captions anymore. The cracks reached public attention when a journalist, one who had covered our foundation before, wrote an op-ed titled, "When Founders Fall Silent, a Legacy Unraveling in Real Time." The article never mentioned my name, but it didn't have to. It detailed discrepancies in financial reports, highlighted missing leadership, questioned the sudden vanishing of the person widely regarded as the glue behind the organization. They reached out to me for comment. I politely declined, because I wasn't interested in burning anything. I just stopped holding the match for them. Meanwhile, my children were thriving. No more visits with whispered judgment. No more car rides home after forced events where June would cry and Noah would bounce in frustration from holding everything in. We had peace. We had normal. And I saw something I hadn't in years. My kids smiling without hesitation. One afternoon, Noah asked me, "Why don't we go to Grandma's anymore?" I paused, then said, "Because love shouldn't have conditions." He nodded, didn't ask again. Children understand truth better than we think. Back in their world, my mother sent one final email, subject line, "Family Matters." Her message was short. "I think it's time we had a conversation. It's gone too far. Come for dinner this Sunday. Just you. No kids. Let's settle this." I didn't respond, because my kids weren't negotiable, and dinner wasn't going to fix what years of dismissal had broken. For them, collapse meant losing influence, losing donors, losing face. For me, collapse was finally standing up straight, and realizing I'd been bent for too long just to fit into a picture that never had room for me. I didn't rebuild my life out of anger. I rebuilt it out of relief. Because once you step away from people who only value you for silence, you start to remember what your voice actually sounds like. It took time. But piece by piece, I began to fill the space they left behind with people, purpose, and peace I didn't need to apologize for. I started working with a local nonprofit, one that didn't host black tie galas or name wings after donors. They ran programs for kids with learning differences, families like mine, mothers like me. No one asked me if my children were too loud. No one said, "Can you sit in the back?" No one said, "They're not a good fit." They said, "You belong here." June began drawing again, entire worlds on paper, just like she used to. She gave her characters soft names like Hope and Quiet and Bright. She told me the quiet ones were always the strongest. Noah started writing poems in a composition notebook he didn't want me to read yet. He tapped rhythms into the dinner table, like music only he understood. For the first time, I wasn't trying to change them. I was learning from them. I began hosting small workshops for parents. Not lectures, just honest spaces. We talked about guilt, shame, the pressure to make our kids fit into boxes they were never meant for. Some of them cried. Some of them exhaled like it was the first time in months. Every time I reminded them, our job isn't to fix our children to fit the world. It's to build a world that fits them. One afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a clipping of the original op-ed, the one about the foundation falling apart, with 3 words scribbled in unfamiliar handwriting across the bottom. "We see you." I smiled, because that was all I ever wanted. Not attention, not revenge, just to be seen. For the work, for the love, for the strength it takes to walk away and build something new with your hands still shaking. I don't talk about my parents anymore. When people ask, I say, we're not close. And that's enough, because I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to live a life that doesn't require me to choose between my children's dignity and someone else's comfort. The woman they tried to erase, she grew roots. She built a home, a purpose, a community. And every day I wake up, I remind myself, this life didn't come from winning. It came from walking away. I kept the letter, the one they left on the counter the day they gave me the ultimatum. It was handwritten, unusually so, with neat cursive and cold wording. This home has rules, and if you can't control your children, then you'll need to find somewhere else that accepts that. They didn't sign it. They didn't need to. Their message was clear. You are welcome, but only if you are quiet. Your children are welcome, but only if they disappear. I folded it and placed it in a small envelope, tucked deep in a file I no longer open. Not because I hold on to bitterness, because I never want to forget the moment I chose them over everything else. We live in a small house now, not a mansion, not a curated showpiece, a home. There are fingerprints on the windows, books in every corner, noise, laughter, the occasional outburst, all of it human and holy. My kids have friends who understand them, teachers who see them, a mother who doesn't apologize for them. And I have mornings without knots in my stomach, evenings without preparing explanations, nights where I sleep without rehearsing conversations in my head. People still ask about the past. Do you think your parents miss you? Do they know what they lost? I always pause, because grief is a strange thing. It doesn't come with closure, just distance, and clarity, and a choice every single day to either build something new or stay buried in what was never mine to carry. So I say, I don't know if they miss me, but I no longer miss pretending I mattered. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the mirror and think, this is the woman they didn't think would survive without them. She looks different now, not louder, not angrier, just whole. And that's the quiet truth they never saw coming. They thought pushing me out would break me, but it freed me, because I was never meant to be small enough to fit in their frame. I was meant to take up space, with my children beside me, and our full, messy, brilliant lives stretching far beyond the walls they built. I once stood in their house, holding my daughter's hand, wondering if love meant shrinking so others could stay comfortable. Now, I watch her run across the yard we call our own, hair wild, heart steady, and I know the answer. Love expands. Love holds. Love never threatens to throw you out for being exactly who you are. And I will never again choose silence for the sake of staying invited, because I don't need a seat at their table. I've built my own. And the people at it? They see me. They stay. And that's the only legacy worth passing on. Family shots. That's what my sister said to me on her wedding day, while adjusting her dress and smiling for photographers. I wasn't late. I wasn't inappropriately dressed. I wasn't even trying to be seen. I was just standing there, the way I always did in this family, a little outside the frame. The seat they assigned me was gone. I double-checked the card. Table 6, seat 3. My name printed in gold. But when I got there, a girl I didn't recognize, blonde, glittery chewing gum, was already sitting there. Oh, she said, someone told me this was open. Turns out she was the +1 of the cousin of the groom's fiancé. Not even family. I asked a server quietly if there were any extra seats. He shrugged. I stood near the exit with my clutch in both hands, trying not to be in the way. That's when I heard my father's voice, just behind me. Honestly, I don't even know why Maya's here. She's always so heavy. She ruins things. She doesn't fit. Then he added, to someone else. I couldn't tell who. I told Sarah not to invite her. She doesn't deserve to be part of this day. I froze. Not because I hadn't heard things like that before, but because this time he said it out loud. At a wedding. Around people. As if it were fact. As if it were okay. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for clarification. I didn't try to earn my place back. I just turned and walked toward the gift table. My envelope was easy to find, thick, white, with a small handwritten card and a folded check inside. $1,000. That money had taken me 6 months to save. But suddenly I knew it wouldn't be missed. I picked it up, slipped it into my clutch, and walked back down the aisle I hadn't been allowed to walk during the ceremony. People noticed. Heads turned. And I didn't stop. As I reached the front entrance, I looked over my shoulder just once and said, "Don't worry, I won't ruin anything else." And then I disappeared. But what happened next, in the days and weeks that followed, would unravel the image they worked so hard to protect. Because they forgot something important. They raised the quiet one. And quiet doesn't mean weak. I used to think there was something wrong with me. Because when your own family acts like your presence is an inconvenience, you start to believe it. That you're too quiet, too awkward, too smart or not smart enough, too emotional, too much, or in my case, just too invisible to matter. Growing up, my sister Sarah was the golden child. She sparkled. She danced. She lit up every room. At least, that's what everyone said. She was the one with the framed awards, the solo parts in the school musicals, the college acceptance letters everyone toasted. I wasn't jealous. I was just tired. Tired of being her shadow. Tired of my dad forgetting my birthday twice. Tired of my mom telling me to stop overthinking when I cried quietly in my room after being left out. I got good grades. Never broke rules. Helped around the house without being asked. Still, I was the one they forgot in introductions. Oh, and that's Maya, our other daughter. I put myself through community college while Sarah got a fully funded degree at a private university. She always had so much potential. I apparently was just practical. I started working right after graduation. Admin jobs, graphic work, temp gigs. Quiet money, saved carefully. Sarah got engaged to a man whose family threw parties that looked like magazine spreads. They planned the wedding in under 6 months. Everyone was involved. Except me. I wasn't asked to be a bridesmaid. Wasn't invited to dress fittings. Didn't get a "will you stand beside me" card in the mail. Just a text. "Hey, can you RSVP online? Hope you're free that weekend." That was my little sister. I told myself I was imagining it. That they were busy. That maybe they didn't realize. But then the wall comment happened. Then the seat. Then my own father, saying I didn't deserve to be there. And in that moment, something in me clicked. I realized I had spent years trying to earn space in a room that had no seat meant for me in the first place. So I took back the one thing that was mine, my choice. My voice. My envelope. My exit. And what they didn't know was, I wasn't just walking away. I had something they didn't expect. Leverage. And I was about to use it. They didn't notice at first. I left before the first dance, before the cake, before the speeches. Maybe they thought I was being dramatic. Maybe they assumed I'd slipped out quietly, sulking. They were half right, but they didn't realize I hadn't just walked out of the venue. I had walked out of their story. The first message came 2 days later. From Sarah. "Hey, saw you left early. Everything okay?" I didn't respond. She didn't follow up. Next was my mother. "I hope you didn't take anything your father said too seriously. You know how he gets when he's had a drink." He'd said it before the wine. I remembered clearly. His voice wasn't slurred. His mind wasn't foggy. Just his heart. Still, I didn't reply. The voicemail started by the end of the week. One from my aunt. "We missed you at brunch. Are you still upset about the seat mix-up?" Another from my dad, oddly short. "You could have said something before storming off. That was embarrassing for your sister." They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't ask how I felt. They just wondered why the photos didn't look right with me gone. Why there was no envelope in the gift box with my name on it. Then came the post-wedding awkwardness. Apparently, the photographer had already uploaded previews to a private gallery. Sarah shared them in the family WhatsApp group. I wasn't in a single shot. Not at the ceremony. Not in the family photos. Not even standing near the wall. My cousin texted me privately. "Hey, did they ask you not to be in the pictures? I thought that was weird." I didn't confirm. Didn't deny. Just replied, "I wasn't really part of the plan." He didn't respond. But 3 minutes later, Sarah removed me from the WhatsApp group. That should have hurt. But it didn't, because for the first time in years, the silence was mine. not something done to me, something I chose. A week later, my boss called me into her office. She'd been at the wedding, not as a guest, but as a consultant. She handled venue contracts and event licensing on the side. It was her side business. She kept it low-key. I hadn't even known she'd be there. She closed the door and looked at me carefully. "You okay?" I nodded. "You know I saw how they treated you, right?" I looked up. That part one hadn't expected. They didn't even acknowledge you. It was like watching someone get written out of their own family. I swallowed. She reached into her drawer, pulled out a folder. "I know something you don't. They're not just cruel. They're careless. And if you wanted to, you could do something with that." I opened the folder, and what I saw inside changed everything. Inside the folder were 2 documents, both signed, both legal, and both directly connected to the wedding. The first was a venue rental agreement, listing Sarah and her husband as co-signers, but also listing my employer, my boss, as the private property owner of the land the reception was held on. She didn't just coordinate the event. She owned the estate. And the second document, a private service agreement, confirming that all vendors, including the caterer, DJ, photographer, even parking attendants, had been paid under one umbrella invoice. Guess who was listed as the event sponsor on that invoice? Me. Or more specifically, the corporate gifting fund I manage at work, a fund I was given permission to dip into for special occasions, under the condition that it served brand visibility and public goodwill. My boss had arranged it as a favor. She offered to help cover the cost of the venue and essentials under my name, as long as I didn't use personal funds, and the family agreed to the promotional terms. They signed, and in doing so, they unknowingly made me the primary underwriter of the wedding. I paid for the venue, the DJ, the food, the valet, even the gift bags. That envelope I took off the table? It was the least valuable thing I pulled from that night. My boss smiled as I sat in silence, processing it. "You're allowed to do nothing. Just walk away. Or, if you want to hold them accountable, I'll back you." "Legally?" I asked. "Legally? Socially? Personally? Quietly?" She wasn't pushing me. She was giving me back the pen. And for the first time in my life, I didn't just want closure. I wanted them to understand. To finally feel what it's like to be erased. To be excluded. To be an afterthought. That night, I reviewed every contract. The signed waiver stating that event sponsorship must be acknowledged in all published content. The invoice showing the venue was billed under my work account, with my signature as the initiator. The catering contract noting my dietary requests, the ones that were never served at the wedding. All of it lined up. They hadn't just humiliated me. They'd violated a business agreement. And for the first time in years, I held something they couldn't dismiss, belittle, or gaslight away. Proof. The next morning, I made a list. Pull company funds back? Notify vendors about the breach? Email Sarah and her husband about the terms they ignored? But none of it was impulsive. There were no threats, no yelling, no social media posts. Just a clean, polite email with all relevant documents attached, and one final line. "Consider this notice that the silence you gave me has now been returned, with interest." They didn't respond right away. My email sat there, unopened by Sarah for 3 days, even though I could see the read receipt trigger from her husband's device. I wasn't expecting thanks. I was expecting shock. And that's exactly what I got. On the 4th day, my phone buzzed. Blocked number. Straight to voicemail. "Maya, this is Dad. What is this crap about the venue? Your sister's telling me you're making demands like some lawyer. I don't know what stunt you're trying to pull, but this isn't funny. You're embarrassing yourself. Enough is enough." I smiled, because they still didn't get it. They thought this was personal. They didn't realize they'd breached a contract. The DJ already contacted me to ask why the sponsor was pulling their digital rights permission. The photographer emailed to say she couldn't legally post any of the wedding photos publicly without permission from the primary event underwriter. That's me. The social media album Sarah had spent hours curating, gone. Taken down. Because my name wasn't in it, but my money paid for it. I didn't reply to Dad. Instead, I forwarded a second notice, this time through my boss's lawyer. a formal warning about breach of agreement and public misrepresentation of corporate sponsorship. The tone was professional, unemotional. It didn't need to sound angry to land like a hammer. The silence that followed told me everything. 2 days later, I got an email from Sarah. No subject line, just, "Why are you doing this?" No apology, no ownership, no acknowledgement of the photos, the seat, the words Dad said. Just confusion, because for the first time in her life, I was the one holding something she wanted. I sat on it, didn't respond. I went for a walk, got a coffee, watched a little girl hug her mom outside a bookstore, and something clicked. They weren't sorry. They were scared. Scared that the person they thought was disposable wasn't. Scared that the version of me they kept at arm's length was suddenly at the center of something they needed. So I replied, not with anger, but with precision. You asked why I'm doing this. I'm not. You did. You signed the papers. You accepted the funding. You excluded me. I'm simply enforcing the boundaries you wrote around me. You said I didn't deserve to be part of your story, and now I've accepted that. I ended it with a single line. You can keep the day, just not the image. Within a week, the wedding posts were gone. The vendor tags? Removed. The photography rights? Revoked. And Sarah? She went quiet, because for the first time in our lives, she couldn't edit me out without losing everything around me. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was quiet. Emails that went unanswered. Photos that never got reposted. Vendors who pulled out of the post-wedding magazine feature Sarah had submitted to, because permissions weren't finalized. I didn't have to lift another finger. They did it to themselves. A week after my last email, my mom called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her voice brittle, like she was choosing every word through gritted teeth. Maya, I don't know what this is really about, but you've made your point. It's over now. Can we please just move on and act like a family again? Act. That was the word that stuck with me, because that's all we'd ever done. Act like we were close. Act like I was part of something. Act like I was never hurting. She didn't say sorry. Didn't say you were right. Just wanted the consequences to stop without acknowledging the cause. That's not an apology. That's a reset button. And I wasn't pressing it. From what I heard through my cousin, the only one who quietly checked in to say, "I'm proud of you," Sarah had been in full damage control mode. She keeps saying Maya overreacted, he said, but she knows. Everyone knows. She humiliated you, and now she's trying to spin it. Apparently, one of the vendors had already left a review on a closed industry forum. Bride's family disrespected event sponsor. Contracts ignored. Poor communication. Would not work with again. They thought I was disposable. But in the end, I was the one person they couldn't erase without leaving a hole in the foundation. They'd planned a post-wedding brunch with local media friends. Small influencer Sarah had been courting for months, hoping for a lifestyle write-up. A mini feature. Hashtags. Brand mentions. But when the press found out the vendor agreements were under dispute, they backed out. No story. No photos. No buzz. Just a quietly awkward brunch. A lot of uneaten food. And a family sitting in silence, wondering how the girl they told to stand against the wall managed to pull the power cord on their fantasy. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Didn't make a social post. Didn't gloat. Didn't even mention it to friends unless they asked. Because this wasn't revenge. This was restoration. Of my worth. Of my boundaries. Of the truth that I had value, whether or not they ever saw it. They thought silence was weakness. But silence in the right hands is devastating. I didn't plan on changing my life after the wedding, but when you finally stop shrinking, it's hard to go back. The silence I walked into became space, and space became something I'd never had before. Freedom. No more tiptoeing around phone calls. No more awkward dinners, pretending we were something we weren't. No more invisible wounds from people who smiled with their mouths and cut with their silence. I invested the wedding gift money. Not just the envelope I took back, the full amount that had been allocated through my employer's fund, now redirected with permission. I started a project I'd shelved for years, a community design program for young women from underrepresented backgrounds. Girls like me. The ones people overlook until they don't. We met weekly, taught each other skills, built portfolios, shared stories, created things that mattered. The program took off faster than I expected. By spring, we had sponsorship inquiries. By summer, I had stepped out of my old job and into a leadership role I never thought I'd earn on my own terms. But I did, because I wasn't waiting to be included anymore. I was building the table. My apartment changed too. I started replacing things, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Lamps, blankets, wall art. I filled the space with softness, with color, with laughter from new friends who didn't know me as Sarah's sister, just Maya. For the first time, I had people over who saw me, not for who I was missing from my life, but for who I was becoming in it. One afternoon, months after the wedding, I passed by a coffee shop where Sarah's Instagram had once tagged as sister date. A post I was never in. Just 2 cappuccinos and a caption that read, "She gets me." That moment used to sting. Now, I walked past without looking inside, because I didn't need their story anymore. I had my own. People think rising means winning, but for me, it meant not needing the scoreboard at all. It meant waking up and not checking if I was being talked about, not wondering if I'd be invited, not asking if I was enough. I am, and the version of me that once stood by the wall, eyes down, waiting for someone to say, "Come join us." She doesn't live here anymore. She's been replaced by a woman who brings her own chair or walks away if none were built for her. I still have the dress I wore to the wedding. It hangs in the back of my closet, clean, unwrinkled, untouched since that day. Not because I can't let go, because I remember everything it taught me. How it felt to stand in a room where no one saved me a seat. How it felt to hear my own father say I didn't deserve to be there. How it felt to leave without raising my voice, without making a scene, without asking anyone to follow. That dress isn't a scar. It's a marker. A quiet line between the version of me who waited to be invited and the woman who finally left the building. Sometimes people ask if I ever reconnected with my family. No, not really. They never apologized, never said we were wrong, never asked what that day felt like for me. They didn't want understanding. They wanted restoration without reflection. And I wasn't going to offer it, because forgiveness isn't about handing back access. It's about choosing yourself in full, even if that means walking forward alone. I've created more life in the months since than I ever did in the years I spent shrinking. I started speaking at small conferences, published a piece about emotional invisibility that went unexpectedly viral, helped one of my design students land a full scholarship. Her thank you card is taped to my fridge. She wrote, "Thank you for not asking me to be small." And when I read that, I knew I'd broken the cycle, because they tried to convince me that standing by the wall was my place. But I was never meant to be in the background. I was just raised by people who feared what would happen if I stepped into the light. The last time I heard from Sarah was a text. 6 words. "You made your point. We're done." She meant it as punishment. I read it as freedom, because what they never realized is I wasn't trying to prove a point. I was proving to myself that I didn't need theirs, their seat, their spotlight, their approval. I didn't need a family who only remembered I existed when they needed something photo-worthy. I needed peace. And now, I have it. Sometimes I still think about the wedding. The music, the lights, the laughter. I wonder if they noticed that, even with all the guests, all the dancing, all the celebration, something felt missing. Not because I was loud, not because I was dramatic, but because when the quiet one leaves and takes her presence, her effort, her energy, her kindness, it echoes louder than any toast. And now, I don't need to be in the picture to know I made the frame possible. I made it all possible. They just looked away too long to notice.